Yeah. Right. Okay. So as I said, I could go into in many directions after the quick description of Black and Scholes, and there's so much more to say. And the link and I assume that many traders know what the major Greeks do means. I don't think it's not meant to be exactly a beginner's group. It's not meant to be a course in any case. So I decided as I said, from the top of my head a couple of days ago that I would go through Greek's equivalence. The link to Black and Scholes is actually that for those who read a bit on how it came about, Black and Scholes was designed to be a hedging technique using properties of financial markets, geometric Brownian motion, and stuff like that. It's interesting but complicated, so I won't touch on that. But because hedging is important, and as we are mostly market neutral or delta neutral traders, there's a distinction between the two definitions. But let's say delta neutral. Most of us, being delta neutral, we need to hedge our delta. We need to hedge our position, if possible, over a large range of the underlying. And so I thought that something that a lot of people don't really look into is gamma. So today I'm going to go through the theta gamma equivalence. So let's start. Okay, so we start obviously with delta. And delta, the variation of a price of an option, V being the price of an option, is more or less the partial derivative of the option price to the underlying multiplied by the difference in the underlying. I mean, this is a simple gradient or first degree derivative definition. So it can be written like this. Difference in option price is the delta at S0 multiplied by the variation in the underlying. And if we now expand using the Taylor formula, the difference in the price of an option is the partial derivative here, delta V on delta S. It's a bit complicated if I use the wording delta, but anyway. And the difference in price underlying. And the second order brings in a second order derivative, which is, if you recognize d2v over ds squared, it's actually gamma, also localized in S0. So the difference in price, and if you extend or expand the Taylor formula, it works better if the underlying doesn't move much. Otherwise, you need to go into higher orders to get closer. This is only an approximation. So basically, the difference in price of an option is a delta multiplied by the variation of the price and the underlying plus half of gamma ds squared. This is not really complex mathematics, and Taylor is, for anyone who studied a bit of math, is probably first-year university kind of thing. So now, with the gamma effect, we simplify the formula. The difference in price in the option is delta, again, localized in S0 times ds and plus half of gamma in S0 plus, times ds squared. So we write it this way, and this is a formula that we can keep in mind. Basically, it's a parabola approximation using factors which are delta and gamma, or half of gamma. If we introduce theta being the difference in price, the derivative of the price of an option on time, so dv equals theta dt. So basically here we all combine it, and it's the difference in price close to S0 again. is delta S ds plus half of gamma ds squared plus theta dt. And to be mathematically correct, changing the round d to a straight d, I don't know how you say that in English, it's only valid if the underlying doesn't move much. Otherwise, we should keep it as partial derivative. So let's assume that because we're looking at local hedging, so trying to see what your delta and gamma, how they behave for a small variation in the price of the underlying. So ds is actually pretty small, as it is in gradient or derivative calculations. And that's actually a small d here. Okay, right. So this is, and that's if ds is pretty small, we can approximate that the d round becomes a straight d. So, and this is really the basis of delta hedging, because what we see now, if we now look at the variation of the price of the underlying, I mean, this is a standard formula that you probably know when you do your T plus N projections. For example, the 1SD projection, you calculate, you use the price of the underlying times sigma, which is the implied volatility, and times the square root of the difference in time. I mean, this is a very common formula, which is here only more mathematically formulated. So if we change the ds in the second part of the equation, we see that ds squared is this squared. I mean, I'm just using so it's equal s squared times sigma squared times dt. So the dv from the previous formula is delta ds plus half of gamma ds squared plus now theta dt. So when one wants to, so once we simplify it, we see that dv equals delta ds plus half of gamma s squared sigma squared plus theta dt. So if we want to reduce the gamma effect, I mean, let's say we have a delta hedging technique, we keep our delta, if not flat, at least straight. For that we need to reduce our gamma, and we see here the formula, which is what I call not I call, but all academics and practitioners call the actual gamma theta equivalence, is that to hedge properly, we need to minimize or eliminate the second element. So this is what it is. So we need to, I just repeat the same formula. So for delta hedging, we need to actually reduce or eliminate this element. So the actual equivalence is here. Gamma s squared, s being the price of an underlying, sigma squared, the IV, equal minus theta. So we see that when theta, here we see the true equivalence between gamma and theta. Something that people don't usually know or understand, because most mentors, most training courses on options trading tell you that, well, gamma, you only see the effect towards the end of a trade. Yes, of course. If a theta picks up, you will have gamma picking up as well. And because we are, well, I'm talking about people who are usually net sellers, so theta positive. But it's actually for those who want to, and a lot of professional traders or institutional traders do hedge their positions daily or twice a week, and they actually make sure, or whether they have a portfolio they want to hedge or anything else, it's actually important to, if you want to hedge, it's important to actually minimize the gamma effect. Of course, if you're on the other side and you want to do gamma scalping, that's going to be, of course, the total opposite. I mean, you will try and benefit from gamma. But I'm here looking at hedging, so reducing the gamma effect. So this is the first the first important equivalence to take into account. And something to take away is that it's always there. It is always there. It's not something that just pops up towards the end of the train because theta picks up. It is always there. So if beginning or towards midlife of your trade, for any reason you want to add theta, there will be consequences down the line, down the road, because you will have, when theta then starts accumulating, you will have more gamma to deal with. That's why, even though it is not portrayed or described that way, the peeling off technique. Usually with my trade, there are 3 stages: takeoff, cruising altitude, and descent, approach, and landing. And one should usually stick to not add theta after at cruising altitude or later. Of course, what I'm saying here is when markets behave normally, if normally means anything. Right now, the markets are a bit crazy, but and there are other aspects to look into, like, for example, that the fact that Black Scholes does not model options prices well when there are jumps in volatility. I will probably have a topic on that in a future session. So here we're talking when market behaves normally. It's a local hedging technique, and you just want to control your gamma as the base rate to control your delta. So the consequence is that adding theta will always increase the gamma, not only at the end of the trade, even if it's more visible. But usually the consequences of your actions will show up later. That's why we always say that you shouldn't, you should stay rational and avoid, emotional trading, over adjusting, all those things, because it's really like steering a boat or an airplane. I mean, it takes time to actually change direction, and sometimes you have that inertia that you have to deal with later down the life of the trade. So, excuse me. I'm not saying that for most of us who want to adjust our positions as little as possible, we don't really do delta hedging, but that's actually the purpose of this kind of trading group, is that I would like us to keep in mind that we're dealing with a number of Greeks, and at least the 4 major Greeks, delta, gamma, vega, and theta, should be kept in mind at all times. And in my particular trading style, I do look at gamma probably more than many traders or many mentors, because many mentors try and oversimplify trade management and strategy, and they say, well, look at your delta, control your delta. The strategy is purely delta based, and I think it's dangerous to oversimplify. So keep in mind gamma as it actually impacts your delta, and look at what can drive gamma, in particular theta. Another thing that is important in my own mentoring is that although I would very much like my students to stay with me for years, I think it's important that people learn a strategy and make them their own, according to their lifestyle, the time they can allocate or dedicate to trading. I mean, there's no one size fits all type of strategy, and I think it all becomes personal. And when you start taking a strategy into your own hands, then you understand, you realize that, well, the basic rules, like a simple delta adjustment rule, is usually not enough. Or to use that same analogy of flying an aircraft, it's good when the weather is fine, but then why doesn't it work when the storm happens? Like and sometimes it actually more than often happens. Okay, another interesting Greek equivalence is the Gamma-VEGA. I won't go back into this. I will probably post some complement as almost like a blog post on the forum. But trust me, this is another equivalence. Vega is actually gamma times sigma times the square of the price of the underlying times t, passage of time. And what it shows is that it's something that we know, I mean, we understand without putting numbers or formula to it. We know that Vega tends to reduce, especially towards the end of the trade. So the Vega comes down, and you become less affected by huge IV swings, although it is not. I mean, it depends on your strategy and the way you manage your strategy, because I do think that when you are in descent and approach, your plane, your trade is actually quite sensitive to weather changing. So, but overall, and that may be actually the gamma effect, but Vega as such becomes less of an issue in the last 2 weeks of the trade. So what's important in this formula is that Vega over gamma time, this is not theta, but time, is roughly a constant or transient constant, because of course it depends on sigma and S squared. And in books, if you venture into reading John Hull's books, or I can actually provide a few references, it's sometimes called the aggregation of gamma over time. So because it's constant, you here see gamma increasing will also make because the ratio is constant, it will make Vega go down. So this is the second equivalence I wanted to touch on today. So for this topic, conclusion is that if you here all these little concepts like expanding using the Taylor formula were based on local hedging techniques. I mean, it's really like approximating a derivative close to a price point. For large variations, the approximation falls away. It doesn't work anymore. But if we assume that you have the perfect hedge of a large range in price of the underlying, DNS, Black Scholes, will always assume that if you hedge perfectly your position, your portfolio, you cannot get more than the risk-free rate. It's almost like a zero-sum game. So, and if I go back quite a few years when I started relearning with Dan Sheridan, for example, and all those old-timers who said, well, you can do everything by the Greeks. You've got your dashboard, again, flying an aircraft, and you've got your instruments. Technically, it is almost true, but if you hedge properly, you will make nothing. So it's really massaging where risk is that you want to, and if you have a higher tolerance for drawdowns, you may accept more delta and more gamma. So there again, it comes down to how you actually translate a strategy that you learn into your own and your own risk aversion. And that's where also I'd like to make a difference as I hinted earlier, between delta neutral and market neutral. No, if you are delta neutral and you try and control your delta by minimizing your gamma effect, you're not market neutral. We always have a bias. I mean, we can have a strong conviction. We can be completely in the dark. And if you're in the dark, you should actually try and hedge your position better because you don't know where the market is going. But we are delta neutral traders. I mean, most of us, but we're not market neutral. I mean, the market will always impact our trades. So again, it's a matter of hedging your especially in times of markets goes absolutely nowhere, like in the last few days and weeks. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I'm losing sense of time, but we had a 2% up day, and yesterday was a big fall, and today it's going nowhere. I'm talking about SPX, but it's the same on most markets. So this is actually a perfect time where you would like to keep your delta flattish. Last week I mentioned that delta is affected by Vega because it's actually part of the equation. So of course your T+0 will be pulled down because of the Vega effect. But overall, I would say that if you can control your delta to an acceptable maintenance of your trade, don't add gamma into, unless you accept it, but make sure that you control your gamma, because gamma is always lurking. It's always there, even if it's more visible towards the end of the trade. Okay, that's the end of the topic. I wanted to make it less than half an hour, and so that, because again, I don't want to make this training group a training course as such. So if you have any questions, please unmute, and then that will also give me ideas about what to cover next time. So if you have any questions, or chat, or unmute your mic, and we can discuss. Have you learned something already, or is it all new to you? I don't know. I know that on other training groups I've been talking a lot about modeling the vol surface. I will come to that, and I will show it in my own software. So there may have been some expectations that we'd be talking about volatility modeling. That will come. I mean, I think there's another section next week. I don't know exactly how Tom has actually scheduled the sessions, but again, if you have any topic you would like me to cover, I'm happy to do that. Any questions? Have you learned something or not of interest? You're all very silent. Maybe you're busy trading at the same time. Oh, okay. Thanks, Tony. I think it's important to know the Greeks, and I will get into the exotic ones. Again, if you have heard me talking on TG1 and other trading groups, I often mention VOMA, which is a second degree derivative of the implied volatility. So gamma is to delta VOMA is to Vega what gamma is to delta. It doesn't mean that there are other interesting equivalences, but yes, VOMA, especially, we're not in a low IV environment at the moment. We are in a medium to high. Some people think it's a high volatility, but VIX at 2021, it's almost like normal. I would say, even if you, I don't have any August position at the moment. But September, of course, my T+0 is a little bit pushed down, but it's fine. Where did I learn deeper meaning about Greeks? Well, I love math. You know, I was a quant. Actually, options were almost my first love before I ventured onto other asset classes. But I've modeled options for the last 25 years. I love the math of it. I've read a lot, and I still go to some quant groups where. So actually, my position here is at Aeromea is to actually try and make it sound simpler. There are very complex topics, especially when it comes to handling volatility. But I will try and make it as simple as possible. Future presentations, how to apply these Greek equivalences to beta trading. I actually hinted something earlier. As I said, when you pilot your trade, very often there are longer term. I mean, you see, I mean, I placed an adjustment today on my September and October trades. Of course, I don't expect anything to happen within a day or two. I'm just like hedging my positions, keeping my delta and my gamma as I want. But it's the longer term effect. So, for example, I decided to roll back a few Brooklyn butterflies. I had plenty capital available. I could have added capital. I could have added theta. Because now lower based Brooklyn W's butterflies are so cheap. It's quite tempting. You add theta, you're still within your planned capital. It looks like a good idea. But at the back of my mind, I know that theta, especially for September is just a month away. I know theta will pick up. So I'm saying to myself, do I want to deal with gamma later down the line? I would say when you are at 35 DT tomorrow for September is usually my turning point where I start looking at descent, approach, and landing. I mean, some traders start much earlier and have closed their trades already for September. I mean, we're all different, but I would say that theta picks up in the last 4 weeks, and especially in the last 2 weeks, providing that you are under the tent, of course, or close to the tent. The sweet spot is usually a good place to be, but so if you don't have any theta issue because you place your trade far out of the money, you will minimize the gamma effect. That's why, for example, people trade RTT, placing their structures way below the market, or bearish RTTs. There are some variants. I mean, that's fine because you will have little gamma effect because you will be far out of the tent, little theta. And I actually see, if you look at, I shouldn't mention or advertise, but you know, Rod Bertino's Trade Dominion, or I can't remember the name of his group. Then you make very little and you try and improve your return on investment by not using planned capital based on Reg T and then on PM. Yeah, sure. But these are, I would call tricks. Generally, I would say that a lot of us, if not most of us, are at the money traders, slightly bearish positions, like the bearish butterfly. I mean, we all place our structures a little bit down below the money, but we are overall ATM traders. We want to end up in the upper part of the tent or in the tent so that we have theta. So if I add theta to a trade, extended the tent to the downside, that's okay, because my addition will provide little theta and not too much gamma down the line. But I would really refrain from adding, even if even if I believe that the market is going to stabilize, it's maybe a question of personal style with my level of knowledge, but I would refrain from adding too much, I would say, ATM theta because of the gamma it will provide. But that's me. Are you including second and third order effects in your software? Third order, no. I have coded VOMA, VANA, CHARM, so a few second degree Greeks that are not normally available. And for people who are interested in hedging, let's not forget that even if we trade speculative positions without any underlying in our portfolio, we still, as I mentioned in this short topic, we still try and delta hedge in some way. We want to control the way we manage our position. So there are some cross derivatives called D delta, D gamma, D delta, D vega. So I have coded also a few cross derivatives, but third degrees, that's pushing it a bit far. Would adding lower orders make Greeks better? I don't understand the question. What do you mean? Oh, I answered it. Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, okay, so basically I'm just opening a reflection. You don't have to learn those equivalences by heart, and a lot of people have that intuition. Just makes it a bit clearer in your head. That's all what it is. Maybe I will have a topic on short-term trading for people, using, for example, my baby rhino as an example, versus normal trading within a month to 2 months. I don't trade leaps. I don't trade far out expirations, but we will see that the dynamics will be, of course, very different. Okay, so before we stop, unless you have more questions, I would very much like to hear from you what you would like me to cover next time. I will probably start talking more about vertical skew, horizontal skew, and slowly approaching volatility surface. But I think the skew is a very important topic. I won't go into detail how to trade the skew, although maybe. But at least that you have an understanding how the skew evolves according to the volatile environment.
Hi, Bruno.
Hi.
This is Tony.
Oh, thank you, Tony. So I was talking to myself. I'm happy you're here. Okay.
For a future topic, I was wondering if I'm primarily a premium seller, so I was wondering is there a way for me to use the Greeks to like predict if it'll touch my short strikes on my premium trades? Like, I know delta could, is more probability, but then like how large or how small delta can be before I need to get out of the trade, if it goes into like
right. Okay.
Or
okay.
gamma. I was thinking about maybe you're monitoring gamma, because then I can see which direction.
Okay, so I think it could be a nice practical extension of on the skew. Yeah, and we'll look at the skew in low, medium, and high IV environments, and whether you should be monitoring closely your trade when the market, for example, falls below your shorts or gets near the shorts, according also to your trading style. But the skew should give you some insight, if not some, yeah. So, yeah. Are you familiar with the skew?
A little bit. I heard of it, but I never heard of, you just said that kind of application. I never thought about looking at the skew more for that purpose.
Okay. So
should be interesting.
Okay. That's quite interesting. Very good idea. So I will introduce the skew, and hopefully we will see some practical application in your trading style. That's actually a very good idea. Okay, fantastic.
Sounds good.
Cool. So that's gonna be for next week or the week after.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, guys, I'm gonna go back to my coding and trading. So thank you for joining this. And there's also the forum. I mean, if you have any questions, because you can. I will post this PowerPoint, but sometimes it's a bit complicated. I mean, really ask any questions, any clarification in between sessions on the forum. Okay, I hope I'll see you next week or the week after. Bye for now.